Getting back.
And the video should come on. There we go.
Excellent. Agenda. Okay, 1, 2, 3,
Thank you.
4, 5, 6, 7. We've got 7. Excellent. We're gonna go ahead and get started. Sorry for those technological difficulties. It was a new one for us, but we got it figured out. So we're starting the meeting at 1:10. I want to welcome everybody who's attending in person or on Zoom. And we'll go ahead and get started with roll call, please, Andrew.
Okay, sorry about that delay. William Weiss.
Present.
Jan Coppinger.
Present.
Catherine Vanderwall.
Here.
Rebecca Harper.
Here.
Jennifer Smith.
Here.
Nara Del Baca.
Here.
Robert Geary. Does not look like he's here. And then Paul Blues for the fire districts.
Present.
Super. So did everybody get a chance to review the July 10th minutes?
I haven't seen.
While we were waiting for a quorum, we all realized that we were having trouble rooting around to find the July 10th minutes. So we're going to table those to the next meeting. However, one other thing we wanted to add is that we're, in the meantime, between now and the next meeting, we're going to try to, instead of just uploading the agenda on the agendas page under the Cannabis Task Force, we're going to try to upload the whole agenda packet. So people will only have one place to go to find documents for the upcoming meeting. Could I get a motion? Is there anyone who in the public who would like to speak to continuing the July 10th minutes to the next meeting? Andrew, I'm going to rely on you calling people.
Yes, Holly Harris is going to speak. I'm going to ask to unmute.
Oh, hi. I just had a question on that because the minutes were up there, but they were on the main page, not on the agenda page. And in terms of discussing it, it said in the minutes, and even though you're tabling it, it said things that were different from what was on the video. And in the video, it said that Maria, you had asked to discuss zoning and permit types at the next meeting. And that's not on the agenda for today. So I was wondering how that works.
Good question, Holly.
Well, as far as the minutes go, the process that Ruby and I have is that as long as they're draft minutes and until they're approved, they're going to be listed on the documents page with all of the other documents that are associated with agenda items. Once they are approved, then they would go onto the agenda table. So that can...
Yeah, I understand that. That actually wasn't what I was asking. I was asking.
Holly, if I understand your question, Holly, what you're saying is that in the minutes from last time, even though we're not approving the minutes, I requested that we discuss both zoning districts and permit type on today's agenda, and which is not accurately reflected on today's agenda.
Correct. That was my question.
Get you. Okay. Darn it. You're right. That was my bad because I asked, I gave Ruby the wording to add it after the agenda had already been posted. That's why we got that quick revised agenda. So that was my fault. So.
Was it the revised agenda that was uploaded on the website as required? Because we were doing it a day ahead of the deadline. And
Right. The revised one added in the review, the informational only review, but it didn't change it to add in the zoning.
Well, are we discussing the zoning? Was that not wrapped up already? I'm going to share my screen quickly.
No, that was in, it was around 8.5 minutes in. Maria asked to have it tabled. And Paul Blues made a motion to table it to discuss both items, zoning and then permits at the next meeting.
Oh, so what I printed out is different than what we were handed.
Yeah, that's the correct agenda. This is the original agenda. That's the revised.
Okay, one moment, Holly. I hear what you're asking. It's a valid question. Let's see if we can figure it out.
Sure.
Yeah, what's online is correct.
There it is. Good. Okay. So informational only review of task force recommendations regarding zoning district. Wait. You're talking about on-site consumption though, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Which we had not made a recommendation about zoning districts for on-site consumption.
Correct.
We had tabled it so that we could talk about it together. So we do have an agenda issue.
As
Okay.
a reminder, on-site consumption comes with a retail license. So in effect, we have discussed it.
Just not the zoning.
Maria said that was not the case in the last video.
So on-site consumption. Okay, so
Well-
let's go through that, Holly.
An event, and we've talked about events, and it goes with events and type time.
So that's separate, though, events are separate, we're talking about on-site consumption as it relates to a consumption lounge, which you have to have a retail license for. And we've already gone through the retail recommendations.
If
I
that's,
was going to say the same thing.
which one's the type 9?
Type nine's delivery, and delivery can have a consumption element. That's some of the lounge.
And so it would come down to development standards, whether or not within a particular zone that we are offering retail if on-site consumption were to be allowed with that retail license in that zone.
And so other than events, is there any other time that we would consider on-site consumption at a location that does not contain retail?
Fair has discussed.
It's an event.
That's out of our
event.
jurisdiction.
It's out of your jurisdiction.
Yeah.
And it's a bring your own, so it's up to the individual. Individual.
Yeah, still out of our-
property owner,
our
so it's not your
Events are
jurisdiction,
separate, like
yeah.
there, you could have a private event where people are smoking.
But that's a special event.
That's a special event, or you could have a special event where there is a retail component where people can buy on site.
And we've
And
already
that
made
would be-
recommendations on special events.
Correct, so in my mind, we've addressed this, and the further discussion of it would become in development standards as we went down the path of, okay, so we are going to allow, let's talk about a specific where we're gonna allow retail in conjunction with a manufacturing license in this particular zone, a manufacturing zone, but they have to have that manufacturing license. So in that development standard conversation, we would decide, have that conversation, will we allow consumption on site with this
Okay, and that's all
auxiliary
state law.
retail? Mhm.
So, Holly, what do you think about this? We would not actually make any recommendation for zonings for on-site consumption outside of what the state would already allow in the definitions. This goes straight to permit types.
There's no consumption lounge.
The issue that I have is I'm a little bit confused on the whole thing. I certainly feel, totally comfortable with following along the same thing as tasting rooms, which is basically a consumption lounge. But I don't know that that's actually been discussed. And I think actually the expansion is a bit more. And I do feel that we do need to have a discussion on it.
And I feel that discussion would come during the development standards.
So what kind of things were you thinking that we would cover then, Holly? Because right now we would not be adding or making any recommendations other than where retail has already been approved.
Well, I guess I would like to know where tasting rooms are allowed.
I remember we covered that and we allowed, I think we mirrored where tasting rooms were allowed, and I'm pulling up my zoning ordinance right now while you're talking, or while I'm.
We did talk about tasting rooms when we talked about retail sales.
Yeah, so, and then I think that the recommendations of the task force pretty much mirrored that, except possibly in some of the commercial areas.
Yeah, in the manufacturing and the commercial areas, it was different. Plus TPZ, I believe, is different, though I understand that cannabis is allowed to be grown there, so that would make sense.
Yeah.
It mirrored, what the county had for
Because we've already
wine,
recommended those with
uh,
the retail.
wine sales.
Okay. Yeah, okay, good. Then after this discussion, I think I'm pretty comfortable moving forward on the task force. If anybody on the task force has concerns with that.
We do have two other hands in the Zoom room.
Oh, hold on a second. I'm still.
Okay.
What did I do with my correct minutes?
Maria, I'm wondering if I can, this is Sarah Bodnar speaking. I'm wondering if I can present the handout that I submitted as part of this agenda on behalf of LCCA.
Not yet, Sarah. Just note that we did present it, and we already made recommendations on where the approved retail is. Right now, I'm just trying to get us to see if we can just discuss specifically permit types for on-site consumption today, or if we need to table this to reword the agenda. I'm leaning toward, since it's just limited to where a state definition would allow retail or would allow it with retail, since it's included in the definition, then we're okay.
My handout clarifies state law around this item, so let me know when you'd like me to present.
Thanks, Sarah. Who else had their hand up? Go ahead, Bart. Oops, sorry.
Thank you so much. Since you're not able to hand the handout to everyone, i.e. me, and if I'm understanding Holly correctly, this is actually a Brown Act issue. The meeting wasn't correctly noticed, and because of that, it isn't about whether everybody can make sense of it. It's about, was the meeting properly noticed? It sounds like it was not.
Thanks, Bart. So to go over the steps that I just worked through, the on-site consumption that we have, the discussion that we have on the agenda is discussion of permit types. On-site consumption would only be allowed where there is retail, because it's part of the definition in the state for retail. Yep, okay. And we have already made recommendations regarding where retail is recommended to be allowed. So we would not be entertaining any other zoning than that. So I think that discussing the permit types for on-site consumption as posted in the agenda is compliant with the Brown Act. And we will limit our discussion to permit types.
I'd like to hear from Holly on this.
This is public input. Holly, is there anything else that you have to add? Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and get started with the meeting.
I wish that you'd actually re-look at the video, because Maria, you were pretty clear about saying that you could not discuss the permit types because the consumption lounges zoning had not been done. And Paul Blues did make a motion, which was seconded by, I believe, Kathy Vandenwall, to move both discussions at the same time to this meeting.
Cool. Okay. So we're not going to discuss zoning districts today because I did not allow that to be, or I did not think to add that word to the agenda. So we will limit our discussion only to permit levels.
Well, you said at the last thing that it couldn't be discussed. You couldn't discuss permit levels because you hadn't discussed zoning. I'm not trying to be difficult about it. I'm just trying to,
Totally. No, I hear you. Thank you. But what I did post was permit type required or requirements. So I think we'll go ahead and discuss that. Unless the task force has issue with that. All right, thanks very much. We're gonna go ahead and get started. Bart, I didn't see your hand go down, so I'm assuming it just didn't go down. What's the next thing on our agenda then? Where is the, I thought somebody handed it.
Maria, I would like to make public comment before we move to the agenda. This is Sarah Bodnar.
We have public comment at the end of the agenda today, Sarah, so we'll pick that up as soon as we tabled the minutes. Oh, so this actually was all discussion about tabling the minutes, but we didn't take any action on July 10th minutes getting carried over to the next meeting. If there's no further public input regarding the carrying over the minutes, then let's go ahead and bring it back to the task force.
Sorry.
Nara, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Dookie? And all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed to carrying over the minutes? All right, cool. So the next item is consideration of permit types required for on-site cannabis consumption. Let's please limit that to discussion of permit types. Let's not go venturing off into different zoning discussion so that we are consistent with the Brown Act. And who's presenting for this today? I think it's Jennifer or Sarah.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about, we're gonna talk about whether it's major or minor, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so then if we go into,
Or zoning permit. We've got, okay, so just a recap of the different permit types. We have ministerial, like a building permit. And the zoning permit. Those things are permits that are available so long as the application conforms to a previously established set of criteria. So let's say for like the discussion that we had on the zoning permit for special events at our last meeting. In our zoning ordinance, it contains criteria that must be satisfied in order to make sure that special events are safe and not a negative impact to the neighborhood. So it's possible. So just so, since Jennifer was talking about the different permit types, I just wanted us to all make sure we were on the same page as to what is possible. I'm not making a recommendation on any of this stuff, but so the possible permits would be a ministerial zoning permit, a minor use permit, or a major use permit. Back to you, Jennifer.
okay, thanks. So previously in our recommendations for retail on-site consumption, which is a type 10 at the state level with consumption designation. I just want to make sure that we're all in alignment and talk about, right now we have that recommended in APZ, TPZ.
Andrew,
Huh?
let's just
Yes.
get to the, let's not discuss the zoning districts. We're gonna talk about what we feel the permit type
Do you
is.
want to talk about permit type per zoning district though?
That's what the issue is. That's what Holly was trying to say, is that it would be hard to
That
make
will
a
encounter an
permit
issue
type.
since we're not talking about, well,
That's what
Okay.
she was, yeah.
so
But the retail's already been
the retail's already there.
in-
We're not making a recommendation on
on
where,
the zoning, we're just recommendation,
on the permit level,
yeah,
which could vary by the zoning.
Mhm.
Okay,
that's where my head's at.
task force input?
I'm confused.
I'm very upset.
So we're not deciding on yes or no zoning districts, and we want it to go in this one, but not that one. We're only talking about the permit levels, which could vary depending on where it is.
Should I ask a clarifying question?
Good luck.
I wish I remembered this. Did we vote, when we recommended retail at those locations, did we vote type 9 or 10? Or do we need to potentially add type 9 in?
We had, yeah, type 9, there are recommendations on the chart that's included in your agenda.
Okay, good.
And that was in the first round of retail.
But I vaguely remember us talking about it.
So if we want to go through like what consumption actually means. If it's consumption on site connected with retail, not an event, this is everything consumed must be purchased. There's no sampling before purchasing. So these are, just so everybody knows. Consumers will be prohibited from bringing outside cannabis into the location to smoke or consume. It allows the consumption of cannabis products purchased on site as long as it's not visible from any public property or non-age restricted area. And this is all in the handout as well. Cannabis consumption must be conducted on a separate premises from alcohol sales. So it's not like there's going to be happening in a bar. Currently, the sale of food and beverage is not allowed in a consumption lounge setting. And I'm not going to talk about what's been proposed until it's actually passed. So really what we need to talk about are, in this meeting, are major and minor use permits, keeping those guidelines from the state in mind.
Mhm.
Speak.
Right, Maria, can I make one comment?
Yeah,
Uh,
Andrew, go ahead.
My understanding with the Brown Act be if there was an issue with the proper agenda, noticing for consideration, we can still discuss all of it. We just can't make a motion on it until the next meeting. Per county council.
Thanks, Andrew.
So just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay. Back to permit levels.
And this has been, this discussion of on-site consumption has been in the last 2 agenda packets. So if that
Yeah,
was
this noticed. presentation.
Yeah.
Was public. I remember, yeah, that was. I'm just,
It
I don't
certainly
see
makes sense.
our recommendations in here.
Where?
9 or 10. In the spreadsheet.
certainly it's online.
Well. I don't
Is
see
the
it.
asterisk proposed, or what's the asterisk by the end here?
Should not be.
Oh, that one, I know that one, because we've been talking about that asterisk for like every time we look at this chart. Where is it?
Down under retail type 9 and type 10, there's a little asterisk after the R.
Under like C-
Was that
C3.
where it had not been allowed before, or? Hey, Sarah, what was the asterisk after the R on the table? Table B?
Hi, this is Sarah Bodnar, Policy Director for LCCA. And I am noticing some discrepancies in this chart. This looks like it's been reformatted from what we submitted, and I'm seeing some things missing. But the asterisk initially included notes from a meeting that happened quite a while back, and I was just trying to pull up the minutes from it because I couldn't locate it. But it's when we were charged by the BOS to come up with, the task force was charged by the BOS to come up with retail recommendations for the county. And at that time, when we had a discussion about on-site sales on farms, we used the asterisk to indicate incidental sales, I believe. And I'm not seeing that reflected in this document that was shared or the notes that we discussed on that at the time. So I don't know which version was posted, but I think we're missing some historic information here on this one. It was incidental to a business on that property.
Yeah, that's fine. We wouldn't, there was no updated table with that information for this. And so just to help the task force sort of visualize what had already been recommended, not the degree to which it was recommended. We just used one of the old tables that we had from a previous meeting.
So that was a very old, the asterisk originated a while back. And at that meeting, we also discussed where tasting rooms were allowed throughout the county. And I think resurrecting the table from that meeting for our next discussion when we have this agendized correctly would be extremely helpful, because we provided a chart for the whole county that showed what are the other ag uses available or that are allowed in all of these zones. And we listed where winery tasting rooms were allowed. It was back in March, I believe, or maybe even earlier. And so I think that would address a lot of Holly's questions and also show where these asterisks came from. Those recommendations already went along to the board, but to my understanding, the board hasn't agendized them yet.
No, it has not gone to the board yet. Okay.
I'd like to speak, please.
One moment. Jennifer, have you
Thank
finished
you.
your presentation on permit levels? Because I don't think you've actually gotten to talk about them yet.
No.
All right, so Bart, hold your question. We're not going to open up for public input yet because we need to get through our presentation on permit levels.
This is about what's happening right now.
One moment, please. We'll get done with our presentation and then open up for public input.
Well, our original recommendations aren't in here, so I'm not really sure where to go from here. I was looking for the chart.
Are we able to speak in generalities?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that to have on-site consumption at a minimum should have a minor use permit
Across the board.
across the board. Mhm.
Whoa, hold on. I think we buried the lead. That could have been like a discussion point the entire time. I don't mean, like, thank you for saying that.
So wherever the board.
Are we allowed to discuss that point?
Yes.
That's a permit level. We are
Yeah,
allowed to
that's a
discuss that at the task force before we open it up.
I feel like there's a reason to actually be in the room. Okay, so what, I mean, so elaborate on that. Are there any constraints thereof or anomalies to
Or
that
maybe
rule?
Jennifer said at a minimum it should require a minor use permit. So what are some areas where you think a major use permit might be more appropriate?
I think we're gonna run into major use permit areas, mostly in the commercial districts. And whether it's setbacks from, I mean, setbacks will be in the development standards, but whether it's, I think we're gonna want neighbor input, and quite honestly.
Possibly in some of the.
Because we have smaller parcels there and neighboring commercial and a lot more public traffic.
Mhm. But I think as far as like out on the large acreage of the APC, the A, the TPC, the RL, those I think would be fine, because it's in addition to an already existing cultivation, so I can't say the word ancillary or auxiliary, whichever word you prefer.
Incidental.
Incidental, thank you, that one's easy for me. Because it would be an incidental business to the cultivation that's already established. And so there you would go through a minor use permit, although sitting here with Paul looking at me, I'm also thinking, what triggers the, because it has to be in a commercial building. And so what triggers the fire and building? Will a minor use permit include that?
It's not just that it's a minor use permit, well, yes, all of that input, but also we should keep in mind that currently only outdoor cannabis cultivation is exempt from 4290 as well. So once a permittee adds in or brings in incidental retail and on-site consumption, that is a commercial use then that is not exempt from 4290 and 4291.
Right, so that's why I'm trying to make sure that we're at a level that triggers all of, I know that the commercial status will, so at what level?
The type 10 application probably.
Actually, the zoning permit, the minor use permit, and the major use permit will all go by fire.
Okay, so then it seems to me that we could go with a zoning permit on that.
On rural areas?
On rural areas that have cultivation.
Discussion task force?
Yeah, I mean, this is why we're here.
Well, didn't we do, for the events, we agreed to do a zoning permit, but also that it would go through fire, or kind of for that issue, because then you're bringing people in and all this stuff.
I think, and it'll probably fall more into the development standards, but I think it would be important for when people come in and apply that when they go from, if they start as strictly cultivation and then decide that they want to move to that on-site consumption or whatever it may be, that they're informed that, hey, right now you're exempt from A standards, but now B standards are going to apply them and it can make that transition. So it's going to be, there's going to be an upgrade that has to occur that, you know.
So if I were
it's
coming
currently
to
in
you,
process.
coming to the county with, let's just talk about a permitted use by zoning, like we currently have it. What would I have to go through if, as any other business? Because it's gonna be a commercial business, so we know there's gonna be fire standards, we know there's gonna be road standards. So all of that becomes part of the business standards, not necessarily.
Well, but, okay, also, let's take CEQA into consideration. Let's say you had a major use permit in order to do outdoor cannabis cultivation. When you modify that approved discretionary project, you can't do it with just a zoning permit. When you're modifying your already approved project, you have to go at the same level of that previously approved project. So it would be a modification to a major use permit in that case. Let's say it was, and that would be beneficial because you're adding conditions and mitigations, which would be that 4290, 4291 at least. There might be other stuff.
Sure.
Let's say you were in some place where you had an approved minor use permit, the same thing would happen. If it's not something that we can just approve, like by making note in the file, which is like, change of ownership or I don't know,
Transportation.
teeny tiny stuff. Yeah, like adding in the transport only, then it goes through a modification of that originally approved minor use permit and it follows that minor use permit trail. Doing a zoning permit could be problematic because it's ministerial, and if let's say in terms of an outdoor cannabis cultivation that had previously been exempt, it will no longer be exempt. And so ministerial may not work on that one. So I went through all that time to tell you about zoning permits, but they may not be appropriate in places where there was not previously a ministerial zoning permit.
And that's a good point, because from our perspective, say that we do put up, and this was something that we had discussed, was the ag structures for like storage and drying and everything. And now if somebody comes in and says that, hey, we want to upgrade and we're going to use a portion of this building now, that whole building, depending on what's going on with it, it may trigger being retrofitted with sprinklers, it may trigger, you know, impact mitigation fees and everything, and that's just on the fire end, you know?
Yeah.
So it goes.
So in
That would
some
be
places,
expected,
yeah, in some
Yeah.
places, a zoning permit, I'm not sure if it would work just because the purpose of the zoning permit is to just make sure that the project meets established criteria. So unless they already have something that's not exempt from 4291, but that might already be there, but I don't know how we're gonna determine that really ahead of time. I need to continue. Y'all need to continue.
So it seems to be at a minimum, we're back to minor use permits. It has, or modification of them,
Yeah,
because,
mods are easier than a new application though.
but some people may be coming in with a completely new.
Right.
Okay, so the modification can just be a clause saying, or if it's, you know, an already established or an already approved use permit, then it follows the modification process of that use permit. But then let's think about the ones that don't have anything yet. Where would
They would need to
permit
apply
levels?
for the cultivation license and a retail license, similar to how the modification would be the beginning of a new application for a type 9 or type 10.
And that
Retail.
feels like a major.
That would be a major. But then what about manufacturing? That have incidental tasting rooms?
Would still, I mean, are you doing any manufacturing by right
No.
in the county? So it's all, it would still have to be a modification, then, right?
Or, well, unless let's say
Or
we
it
have
would be
a
brand
new, yeah, we're getting new applications in the future.
So would that be part of the, like the application checklist, that, or pre-application checklist, something like that? It would be included, like, hey, you're a brand new manufacturer in the county of Lake. Here are the requirements. Are you planning to do any of these activities which are now permitted by the county? And here's what we need you to submit so that you can get permitted for those activities.
Or the task force has made recommendations for varying levels of permit types for retail. Perhaps the task force would just say the permit level for retail or for on-site consumption would mirror retail, since it's actually kind of part of retail. So if anybody wants to go on with retail and with or without on-site consumption, it's the same permit level.
That's kind of the question I was about to reach for, is if there's, it seems discussion has already established this as precedent that retail, at least in the eyes of the state, includes some level of allowable on-site consumption. We're saying in order for on-site consumption to be allowed, there would need to be a minor use permit. So doesn't that mean that all retail would require a minor use permit? I realize that's not literal, but
I think we voted on that earlier, because we were asked whether there should be discretionary review. That was one of the things the Board of Supervisors sent us when we first went into our
So-
retail conversation.
Yeah, and I'm just pulling up our final retail recommendations that we did go through. And so,
I don't think you can do it anymore by right?
retail?
Right.
No, we took that out,
We took that
yeah.
out, so that. so
Yeah, but then we opened up a number of zoning districts to allow for where cultivation is the primary use.
So there wouldn't be a zoning checklist or zoning. There's just not an ability to do it by right anymore. The county has to.
Correct.
by use permits.
Right, yeah.
And so, for example, in APZ, we did a minimum of 20 acres and we did a minor use permit for retail, which is not on this chart.
And that was incidental to the cultivation.
Correct.
Pretty much, if I
Pretty much
remember correctly,
everything.
except for commercial zones where it
Yeah.
could stand alone.
Exactly.
Other than that, it had to be incidental to its.
And I don't think that we were
primary
so
use.
very clear about that in the beginning because it didn't come up later until the commercial and manufacturing zones.
Right.
While we're talking about permit types, do we want to, this is probably not right, but what about a distributor, a standalone distributor that wanted to do on-site consumption and retail?
Distributor can't be retail, can they?
They can't, well, I mean, they could be part of a micro business.
Mm,
But that, they would
In
have
which
to have
case
the
it would have
retail at
retail.
that spot.
right.
Yeah. Yeah,
So-
it's a weird, and I don't know that there's anything that would really.
That just feels weird.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the only
Yeah.
place that would happen is actually in Clear Lake, and Clear Lake does their own permitting on this, so maybe it's not really
Okay.
a problem.
Okay. So then back to what Will was saying, then, would the permit levels just follow or mirror the permit levels that we've already approved for retail?
I feel that they should, yeah. For on-farm retail consumption in APZ, we had recommended a minor use permit. And it looks like most of the ag zones, we did do a minor. I don't see a major use permit until suburban reserve.
Do we have one on RR or not?
Let me get to our minor use permit in our,
The notice requirements are pretty much the same. So neighbors will be able to-
and I mean, and are currently allowed our bed and breakfast, Christmas tree farms, farm labor quarters, produce stands. So we're mirroring what's, existing
Mhm.
businesses in that zone.
I remember that was part of the original discussion.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, so are we settling somewhere around, it would just mirror the permit level for retail?
So that way.
Okay, let's open that up for public discussion. Who do we have first, Andrew?
Sorry, I was muted. It looks like Bart Levinson. So Bart, go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Yes, I just wanted to say, I think I've heard several times members from the Cannabis Alliance say that they presented different lists than what is currently being shown or being presented. And that's really important to me, and I think important to everybody in this room. And I'd like to ask if there could be, not this meeting, but coming up soon, a review of all of the asks by the Cannabis Alliance and whether the correct ones in their minds have been the ones that have moved forward, or if there are differences, so that we can find out sooner rather than later, and perhaps create a procedure where we agree on a regular basis, like with minutes, as to what documents, what record of agreement has been accepted to date.
Hey, Bart, I think we're just gonna go ahead and rely on the minutes, which should have all been approved by the task force and should reflect the actions taken by the task force. But thank you for.
I'm not hearing that as being said as accurate, Maria, I'm sorry.
Well, actually, the way it goes is if the minutes have been approved by the task force, then that is the public record. That is our vital record, and that's the only thing we can stand on going forward, regardless of what happened during discussion. Once the task force takes action on a recommendation and that recommendation is then put into the draft minutes and then those are approved, that's our record.
I think the Cannabis Alliance is being shortchanged.
Well, then the Cannabis Alliance is really gonna have to step up their game and make sure that their recommendations are heard by the task force, but it's really up to the entire task force. So, because that's the deciding body on this, or that's the recommending body.
The recommendations that we're referencing are recommendations that were already passed by this task force 3 months ago.
Yeah, so we can't change those. We want everything to be consistent. Will, did you have a question?
Only just to follow up that, without meaning to browbeat anybody at all, it is a little bit confusing and sometimes frustrating that perhaps this record is not entirely up to date. I also recognize that that is a mistake, not a matter of conspiracy. Just would like to say that out loud, that's all.
Okay, Holly, or sorry, Andrew, who's next?
Yeah, Holly Harris.
Oh, hi. Maybe, I don't know if you remember now, but I thought I remembered when we were discussing when you were discussing the storefront the on-site, et cetera, retail sales. I thought, Will, you made a motion and it was going to be a minor use permit if it was under 750 square feet and a major use permit if it was over 750 square feet. You know, kind of mirroring the tasting room things.
Is that is considered, I mean, what were we saying a minute ago that we followed tasting room?
We need to, yeah, Holly, we're gonna have to check the minutes on that one.
Okay.
I can speak to that to some extent. If I remember correctly, it did come up in discussion as a possibility, but the fact that the Board of Supervisors limited our scope to just storefront retail, we moved forward with storefront retail as a minor use permit and deferred the square footage in terms of consumption to really the discussion we're having now. So
If you could check on that, because I remember.
I'll check on that. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay,
so.
Thank you.
Yes, is that you, Angela?
It is, Maria. Thank you. And I would just have to, you know, say I was going to bring up the same thing that Holly brought up, that there was a discussion of maybe under and over the 700 square foot, 750 square foot limit, or setting a different limit, but that's probably a good base, even no matter what zone it's in. Just so maybe something to consider, even if it wasn't in the previous minutes, maybe it's something to discuss and consider today. Thank you.
I thought that was part of the discussion, but then we ended up with more of it, is it a primary use or an incidental use? I don't really remember that action being taken on square footage, but Andrew's gonna check the minutes on that one.
Thank you.
So, but we won't change a previous recommendation. That's not what we're here to do today.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, anybody else want to speak on same permit levels as retail for the recommendation? Seeing no hands up in the Zoom room, we'll bring it back to the task force for action. That means a motion.
Go for it. Okay. I move that we accept the same permit level as we have for type 9 and 10 recommendations for on-site consumption.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Vote aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Okay, so the motion then that carries is that the permit level of on-site consumption will mirror the existing recommendations of permit levels for type 9 and 10. Cool. So moving forward, the next item on our amended agenda was just a summary and next steps. And well, first, before I am able to address that, Ruby, do you know the latest date of approved minutes? We've been tabling a lot of them.
No, it was the previous, so the only one we were missing was July 10th.
Super, okay. Yeah, we went through a number of them, okay.
Yeah. And
Okay.
they are posted like where the minutes, so where you find the agenda, that little green box or whatever, those are the approved minutes.
Excellent. So what I'd like to do is start working on, and this is not task force, this is now community development staff, is we'll start working on a summary of the recommendations or a presentation of the recommendations to date, specific to the zoning districts and permit level types for the various uses that we have covered. I'd like to present that to the board before we get into what we talked about before, like other facilities or design and development standards, because I think this is a really good time to get the board's input on how aligned we are. If there are items that they want to add or items that they want to take off, it could affect our design and development standards. And so I think this is a really good time to just sort of touch base with them. That being said, touching base with them means that first we're gonna go through the Ag Advisory Committee, because I'm pretty sure they're gonna want to talk about this one. And then move on to the Planning Commission for all those recommendations, and then the board. So we will have time in the next meeting or two to get those July 10th as well as today's minutes approved. And then we'll have that full set of recommendations for those three items.
And I think Rebecca brought up last time that we collectively would like to see what goes forward to the board before it goes to the board to make sure it is reflective of what we believe we've.
That's right. I
recommended.
thank you for that reminder. We'll make sure that we do that too. Do you want to see it before it goes to the Ag Advisory Board, just to make sure? Like maybe we can prep it for our next meeting?
Before it goes to any other committee.
Okay. So,
And is that something we have to do in a meeting? So is that gonna take another 2 weeks? Or is it something?
if we're establishing a task force consensus, we have to do so in open session.
Okay.
So yeah, so we will want to have that then added to our agenda at the next meeting. We'll work on the wording for
But
that.
potentially that could be sent out prior to the meeting for review of the task force so that we can come to this meeting and, you know,
Yeah, well,
similar
we
to how
tried
we
to
review the minutes.
post our task force agendas previously or ahead of time, of course. And so you'll definitely have sufficient time to review that. And as I stated before, at the beginning of the meeting, we're gonna really try to get the entire agenda packet all in one thing located at the download link on the Agenda Center page, so that people don't have to go hunting around the website for the various parts of our agenda. So. Okay, that is an informational only item. Is there any input from the task force on that?
Sounds like a good plan to me.
Okay, anybody in the Zoom room care to address our next steps?
I believe we have Bart Levinson.
Thank you. I'd like for there to be a double check with council about the Brown Act requirements about documents presented in the 72-hour notice packet, being the ones that are presented in the meeting, and just a process for double checking that has been done.
Thanks, Bart. Anyone else have their hand up in the Zoom room? Okay, if not, then we will take it back. Are there any public comments regarding items that are not on today's agenda but are under the purview of the Cannabis Task Force? All right, going for public input. Bart, I'm assuming your hand is still up because I didn't see it go down. We'll move on to Angela.
Thanks, Maria. And this is mostly because of something that you said earlier. In regard to the meeting minutes, you said that those are the official record, which I understand. Now, is the recordings that you guys are doing on Zoom, are those also part of the official record? Are those to be kept at the same standards as the minutes? The only reason I'm asking this is because if the minutes are the written minutes are very vague, and from other groups that I attend, their minutes are quite detailed. So my only concern is if we're going to only rely on the typed meeting minutes in the future, either maybe we need to add more information to them or ensure that the video is going to be available at the same time. And then my other question is, I'll just go through it real quick. Now that the cannabis industry can become members of the Farm Bureau, is this seen as a conflict now that if they become a member of the Farm Bureau, would that be seen as a conflict with having 3 seats that are representing between the LCCA seat, the industry and the Farm Bureau? That'd be.
Thanks, Angela. Let me answer that first part. The video helps to supplement, but it is not the deciding document. The vital document that continues for posterity is the minutes. We chose in the beginning to take action minutes similar to the ones you'll see at Planning Commission or Board of Supervisors. And so the video is a helpful supplement, But just like the videos for the planning commission and board of supervisors, those are not, to the best of my understanding, those are not vital records themselves. I on the minutes and the agendas. And I'm gonna defer over, or I'll pass it over to Rebecca regarding the Farm Bureau membership.
Okay, sorry if you call, if sorry you caught my card as my computer restarted there for a second.
Hi, Angela. This is Rebecca with Lake County Farm Bureau. Can you hear me?
I can, thank you.
Yes, so I'd love to address your question. Cannabis growers are only allowed Farm Bureau membership as associate members. And as such, Farm Bureau does not advocate on the behalf of cannabis growers for any matters.
Okay, so it's more for them to use as a marketing or for future other aspects outside of that.
Yes, so potentially we could partner with cannabis growers or other cannabis businesses, but as associate members, they don't receive any advocacy efforts on our behalf. Only our agricultural members receive those benefits.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Maria.
Sure. Is there anyone? Thanks, Angela. Sarah.
Hi, this is Sarah Bodnar, Policy Director.
We can barely hear you, Sarah.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
Great. Sarah Bodnar, Policy Director for LCCA. And I wanted to ask about the progress on environmental review on the temporary drying structures ordinance.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Oh, sorry, could you repeat that, Sarah? I was reading about Brown Act documents. Are you asking about the initial study for the temporary drying structures?
You guessed it. Yep.
Yes, that I've been working focused. In fact, I'm a little out of touch with the current happenings of the task force because I've been focused on that so much. The initial study is about 90% done. We will be completing it this week and getting it uploaded to the state clearinghouse for 30 days of circulation. And during that 30 days of circulation, start making the preparations to bring it back to the Board of Supervisors as soon as that 30 days is up.
So does policy have to go through the state clearinghouse and in the same fashion that a use permit does?
My understanding is yes.
I've never heard of that before.
I can. Well, it's based on a 2019 ruling, California State Supreme Court ruling. Maria, did you want to speak more to that?
It's the initial study that needs to be that needs to go through that public review period, including uploading to the state.
So it's just a notice period.
Yep. They're like a big old clipboard.
Yeah.
In terms of sequencing, does that 30-day period have to expire before it comes to the BOS?
Yes. Yeah, we would need to collect all comments made on the document before going to the Board of Supervisors. So if we did it before the 30 days, we could get a very significant comment, on the last day, and we've already taken it forward. So yeah, we need to give them the 30 days.
Just as long as we all recognize that we will not have temporary dry structures for this season.
We can get it to the Board of Supervisors by the end of August, beginning September. It's really, it's a tight crunch. It's similar to the hoop houses for outdoor cultivation. By the time it came in, it was only a few of our cultivators were able to take full advantage of it. But I think as Maria has previously stated, we can't skip CEQA. So
was the ordinance not found to be CEQA exempt? Is that why this is taking this course?
Correct. Yeah. But it is, currently I got to work with County Council and Maria on a few items, the few final items, but the majority of it is a negative declaration.
So it just needs the 30 days.
However, one thing, while the ordinance, or let's say the ordinance is adopted, while it's taking that 30 days to go into effect, we are able to process building permits. So they can be issued.
Building permits.
Whatever permits they approve there, because yeah. And so they could be issued on the day that the ordinance goes into effect.
It's a little hard because the hoop structures were 4 meetings, the Board of Supervisors. So
I'm really in no rush now.
Well, because this item required an initial study, the project description within the initial study, I believe you guys would appreciate it. I'm very well practiced at going back to videos and minutes and meetings and collecting them and putting them into a coherent timeline now. So when it does go to the Board of Supervisors, because it's had that level of review and environmental review and study, it's going to be very clear and straightforward.
All right, thanks, Sarah. Sarah, were you done with your public input?
I am, thank you.
Okay, Bart?
I'm sorry, I meant to lower my hand.
Okay, thanks, Bart. I don't see anybody else in the Zoom room. Do you, Andrew?
No, I do not.
Then we'll go ahead and adjourn. Thanks, everybody. 2:05, we're adjourning.